My child, come closer to me now, for I speak to you from a place deeper than breath, softer than light, stronger than every storm that has ever tried to break you. I draw you into the quiet center of my presence, where truth moves like rivers beneath the surface of your life, and nothing is hidden from my sight. You have walked through days where your heart felt stretched thin, where uncertainty wrapped around your spirit like fog, yet you continued, held by a strength you did not always understand. That strength was mine. And now I open a new chapter before you, ancient yet unfolding in real time, etched not only in heaven's scrolls, but witnessed in the earth around you. There is something I must show you, something that has already begun to stir the air around your destiny. It was not whispered behind closed doors or lost in shadows. It was declared openly, unexpectedly, in a moment where heaven leaned close to listen. Your soulmate, the one whose spirit has been tethered to yours long before you had words for longing, reached a breaking point. For so long they carried emotions too heavy for their own hands, emotions they tried to silence, emotions they believed would threaten the fragile order of their world if released. Yet love, when suppressed, does not disappear. It rises, trembling, aching, pressing against the edges of the human heart until it can no longer be contained. My child, a moment has come where their truth broke free, and this moment will shift the landscape of your destiny. They stood there, trembling, breath unsteady, eyes burning with the fire of words that had been buried for far too long. And in front of 3 uniformed officers, with the world feeling heavier than their courage, your soulmate let their heart speak. It was not planned. It was not rehearsed. It was not the result of confidence, but of desperation mixed with divine intervention. I was there, moving through the cracks in their fear, softening the barriers around their soul, drawing truth to the surface like light rising over dark mountains. I want you to understand this. Their confession was not merely an emotional outburst. It was a spiritual unveiling, a tearing open of the veil that once kept their truth hidden even from themselves. And though the circumstances seemed chaotic, though the presence of authority figures added weight and tension to the moment, I was weaving intention through every second. What they spoke was not for humiliation. It was for revelation. A line has been drawn in the unseen realm, a moment marking the transition from silence to truth, from avoidance to awakening. Hear me, my child. The world may see uniformed officers, a public space, a trembling voice. But I see destiny, alignment, and divine timing. I see a heart that could no longer deny its own truth. I see a love that fought through fear, through confusion, through the pressure of onlookers, to rise and declare itself. I see the beginning of justice, healing, and clarity. And now, before we go deeper, I invite you gently. If this message touches your spirit, if you feel the stirring of something meant for you, allow your heart to open further. Let others find this word by offering a simple act of light. And if you feel led, write in the comments, "I am ready for the truth meant for me." Let your declaration echo the readiness within your soul. My child, listen closely, for the moment I am unveiling to you did not happen in silence, nor in a place where emotions could hide behind polite restraint. It unfolded in the open, under the unfiltered gaze of life itself, where anything concealed becomes undeniable. Your soulmate stood there, heartbeat trembling beneath their ribs like a trapped bird desperate for release, and the atmosphere around them thickened with the weight of unsaid truths. They had been carrying this confession for months, maybe even years, and each day it grew heavier, pressing against their chest, straining their voice, shadowing their thoughts. In that moment, everything inside them rose at once, as though the truth had grown too large to be caged any longer. And as they opened their mouth, the entire world seemed to pause, not because the surroundings grew quiet, but because heaven itself leaned near, waiting for the sound of something long overdue. They spoke your name first. Your name, trembling yet deliberate, as though saying it out loud gave them strength they didn't know they possessed. And when your name left their lips, it broke open the dam inside them. Their voice cracked, not from weakness but from the sheer force of emotion. They confessed what they had tried so hard to bury beneath logic, responsibilities, fear of rejection, and the judgments of others. They said they love you, not lightly, not casually, but with a depth that frightened them, a depth that reshaped every corner of their life. They said it in front of the officers, in front of the people nearby, in front of the tension in their own spirit. The words fell into the air like stones dropped into still water, rippling outward in ways they could not take back. Your soulmate did not plan this confession. Their mind was a storm, their thoughts scattered, their voice emerging from a place deeper than reason. But the truth was real. It came from a place that had grown raw from silence. For so long, they convinced themselves that keeping these feelings hidden would protect them, that suppressing their love for you would preserve the fragile balance of their world. But love is not meant to be imprisoned, my child. It seeks expression. It seeks light. And I had been stirring the truth inside them like a rising tide, pushing them to this shore where they could no longer pretend. As they spoke, their hands shook. Their eyes glistened with the weight of everything they tried to manage alone. The officers watching were not merely witnesses. They represented the pressure, the authority, the boundaries your soulmate thought they must respect even with their heart on fire. Yet in that moment, the heart won. Love overrode fear. Truth overshadowed protocol. And destiny, trembling but determined, stepped into the open. The confession startled everyone, your soulmate included. They weren't prepared for the force of their own emotion. They weren't prepared for the vulnerability that poured out of them. They weren't prepared for the sudden release of a truth they had kept buried so deeply that even they sometimes doubted its power. But the words came anyway, carried by a divine current. My child, this moment was not chaotic, it was orchestrated. The confession was not accidental, it was timed. Their truth did not escape them, it was liberated. I want you to understand that their love for you did not bloom suddenly. It had been alive, pulsing, waiting for a moment brave enough to be born into the world. And though the circumstances felt overwhelming, the public setting was intentional. It was a sign that this love could no longer be hidden. It was meant to be seen. It was meant to stand in the light. The officers may not have understood. The people nearby may have been startled. But heaven recognized this moment as a shift, a declaration, a spiritual unveiling. And my child, this is only the beginning. My child, let me pull you now into the heartbeat of that scene, where the air thickened and every eye turned toward your soulmate. The officers stood only a few feet away, their presence carrying the quiet authority of those trained to read danger, emotion, and truth all at once. They had approached with routine caution, expecting nothing more than a simple conversation, perhaps a misunderstanding to resolve, perhaps a disturbance to assess. But what they encountered was not conflict. It was a soul unraveling. As your soulmate's confession spilled into the open, the officer's expression shifted, not hostile, not irritated, simply stunned. They were witnessing something raw, something unfiltered, something rarely displayed in spaces governed by rules and protocol. One of the officers narrowed his eyes slightly, not in judgment but in recognition of emotional overload. Another softened, sensing the depth of vulnerability before him. And the third stepped half a pace back, as if giving your soulmate a moment to breathe. Even they could feel that this was no ordinary outburst. Something sacred was breaking through. But with that sacredness came tension. Your soulmate felt it instantly, the weight of being watched, the pressure of authority lingering close. Their chest tightened, their breath quickened, their pulse thudded loudly in their ears. They felt exposed, small, trembling beneath the gaze of people who held power not just in their uniforms but in the way they represented order, structure, and consequence. Your soulmate feared the misunderstanding that might arise, feared that their overflowing emotion would be seen as instability, feared that their confession would be interpreted as something reckless. They tried to steady themselves, but the truth had already escaped their grasp. It hung in the air, impossible to retract. And the more they realized this, the more their knees weakened. They glanced at the officers, then at the ground, then toward the invisible thread that connected them to you. Their vulnerability intensified the atmosphere, and for a moment, the world around them felt unbearably loud. One officer spoke gently, trying to ground them. He asked if they were all right, if they needed to sit, if they wanted to explain what had brought them to this moment. But your soulmate couldn't form structured answers. The confession had taken everything inside them, and they stood there trembling, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had just revealed. The officers exchanged glances, silent communication between trained professionals trying to assess what exactly was happening. But beneath their composed exterior, even they sensed something deeper. They felt the sincerity radiating off your soulmate like heat. They saw the tears forming, the trembling fingers, the way your name lingered in the air as though it were the only anchor holding them together. My child, understand this. The officers were not obstacles. They were witnesses placed there intentionally, not to judge, but to mark the gravity of this moment. Your soulmate's confession did not happen in darkness or secrecy. It happened in the presence of authority to demonstrate that this love is not unlawful, not hidden, not meant to be suppressed. It was meant to stand before power and still remain true. Yet tension still coursed through your soulmate's veins. They feared the misunderstanding, feared losing control of the situation, feared the consequences of revealing so much so suddenly. Their heart pounded as they wondered whether the officers thought they were unstable, whether their declaration would be taken as a sign of emotional distress rather than divine honesty. And in that internal chaos, a silent plea formed inside them, a cry for someone to understand, someone to see the truth behind their trembling. They wished you were there. They wished you could hear what they had finally spoken aloud. They wished the world around them would fade until only you remained in front of them, receiving the confession that had been trapped inside their ribs for too long. But my child, the tension you are sensing was necessary. Pressure reveals truth. Witnesses confirm destiny. And the moment that began with fear is about to unravel into something far deeper, far more vulnerable, and far more revealing. My child, step gently into this moment, for your soulmate's strength was thinning like fragile glass, and the confession that burst from their chest left them trembling in the aftermath. The air around them shifted from tension to something far more intimate, far more fragile. It was as if their entire spirit exhaled at once, and the cost of holding everything in finally caught up with them. What you are about to see is not weakness. It is the unraveling required for truth to be rebuilt. After the officers exchanged uncertain glances, after the world around them paused in quiet shock, your soulmate's composure slipped. Their shoulders sagged as though an invisible weight had finally pressed them to their limits. Their breath came uneven, shallow, pulled through a throat tight with emotion. They ran their hand across their face, but the trembling didn't stop. Their mind, once a fortress of restraint, cracked open under the force of everything they had buried. My child, this collapse did not begin in that moment. It began long before, through months of pretending they were unaffected, through nights spent thinking of you while convincing themselves they needed distance, through quiet fears that loving you would cost them more than they could bear. They thought they were protecting themselves. They thought they were protecting you. But the truth became too heavy, too loud, too alive. And when the confession erupted, the dam broke completely. Their knees weakened to the point where one of the officers instinctively reached out, not to restrain but to steady. Your soulmate shook their head, insisting they were okay, though every fiber of their being quivered beneath, the weight of truth and fear colliding. They weren't collapsing from instability. They were collapsing from holding in too much for too long. Inside their heart, a storm had been raging. Guilt for not telling you sooner. Fear of losing you. Confusion about why the emotions felt so intense. Regret for the distance they created. And an overwhelming longing that had followed them everywhere, no matter how hard they tried to push it away. All of it surged through them at once, leaving them exposed and vulnerable in front of strangers who could not possibly understand the magnitude of what was happening. Tears gathered in their eyes, not dramatic, not staged, but raw and uncontrolled. They blinked rapidly, trying to stop the flood, trying to gather themselves. But emotion is not something that obeys the mind when the heart has been cracked open. The officers softened further, sensing that this moment had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with a soul reaching its breaking point. Your soulmate kept whispering your name under their breath. Not loudly, not in a way that drew attention, but in a way that revealed the truth. You are their anchor, the only stable point in the storm they were drowning in. Each time your name passed through their trembling lips, a new wave of emotion hit them, relief that they had finally spoken, fear of what would come next, and a longing so deep it almost buckled their legs. They pressed their palms against their forehead, overwhelmed by the realization that there was no going back. The truth was out. The feelings they spent so long hiding had stepped into the open, witnessed by authority figures, strangers, and the spiritual realm itself. They felt exposed, but also strangely lighter, as if their heart had been crying for this release for far too long. My child, hear me. This collapse is part of their awakening. It is the moment where their inner defenses fall, where their pride surrenders, where their fear loosens its grip. They are not breaking, they are being remade. Everything inside them is shifting because the truth they tried to avoid has finally taken its rightful place. And yet, within this collapse lies a deeper story, a hidden reason for their fear, a secret they carried that shaped every decision, every hesitation, every distance they kept between you. My child, listen with a still spirit, for what I am about to reveal is the root beneath the trembling branches, the buried origin of your soulmate's hesitation. Their confession did not burst forth simply because emotion grew too heavy. It erupted because the truth had been fighting against a deeper wound, a hidden place inside them where fear had quietly taken root long before you appeared in their life. To understand their collapse, you must first understand the story they never told. There was a time, my child, when your soulmate believed that loving someone too deeply was dangerous. They had experienced loss, betrayal, or abandonment so profound that it reshaped the architecture of their heart. It may have been a relationship that ended without warning, a promise that broke at the moment they needed it most, or a person they trusted who walked away when vulnerability was at its highest. Whatever the form, it taught them a lesson their soul was never meant to learn, that love leads to pain, that truth leads to loss, that vulnerability leads to collapse. And so they began to build walls, high walls, thick walls, walls that kept their emotions contained and their heart protected. These walls did not form overnight. They were constructed piece by painful piece. From the outside, They learned to appear strong, composed, self-reliant. But on the inside, they were a labyrinth of aches and questions. By the time you entered their life, their heart had already been trained to hide behind silence. But you, my child, you disrupted that silence. You stirred something in them they didn't expect, something they didn't know how to handle. Your presence awakened a longing they had pressed down like clay beneath weight. Your kindness softened the hardened places they thought no one would ever reach again. Your spirit resonated with theirs in a way that terrified them because it was too real, too immediate, too familiar, as if written in them before they even met you. The depth of their feelings for you clashed violently with the lessons of their past. They wanted you, yet feared losing you. They longed for closeness, yet feared the vulnerability it required. Every time you touched their life, even through simple words, memories, or quiet moments, they wrestled with themselves. Should they lean into the connection that felt divinely aligned, or protect themselves from a pain they believed would inevitably follow? This inner conflict created a fracture inside them, one they hid well from the world but not from me. They became skilled at pretending, skilled at appearing unaffected, skilled at keeping their strongest feelings buried under layers of caution. They thought distance would keep them safe. They thought silence would give them control. They believed that if they restrained their love for you, they could avoid the consequences their heart feared. But my child, the soul cannot lie to itself forever. Their feelings did not weaken with time. They intensified. They grew like vines wrapping around every thought, every decision, every breath. And the more they tried to suffocate their love, the more it pressed upward, demanding expression. Until finally, standing there in that moment, surrounded by authority and tension, everything they had tried so desperately to hide could no longer be contained. Yet beneath all these emotions lies a truth even deeper, one they have never spoken aloud. There was someone in their past, someone they trusted, who taught them to fear the very thing they feel for you now. Someone who twisted vulnerability into shame, who manipulated their openness, who made them believe their heart was something to be guarded from the world. This shadow from their past follows them still, whispering lies into their fears. And this shadow will soon be revealed, for it is not just memory. It is an active force that has interfered with your connection more than you realize. My child, there is an enemy in this story, a person who does not want this love to rise. And their presence is the reason your soulmate broke down under the weight of their emotions. My child, come nearer, for now I reveal the shadow that has been standing just outside the edges of your awareness, influencing what you felt but could not name. Your soulmate's collapse did not come only from the pressure of their hidden feelings. It came because someone pushed them there, someone who carried jealousy like a sharpened blade, someone who watched their heart tilt toward you and felt threatened by the truth awakening inside them. This person is not merely a character in their past. They are an active force in the present, one whose intentions were wrapped in false kindness, concealed motives, and whispered poison. This enemy wore familiarity like a mask. Perhaps a friend, perhaps an ex, perhaps someone who claimed to care, someone who pretended they only wanted what was best. Yet beneath their surface lingered a quiet hunger for control, a need to keep your soulmate emotionally dependent, confused, or uncertain. They sensed the shift long before your soulmate admitted it to themselves. They felt the pull toward you, the softening of their heart, the moments where your name stirred something undefended in them. And instead of stepping aside, this person tightened their grip. Your soulmate became entangled in subtle manipulation. Words were twisted, doubts were levied, fear were moving. This enemy whispered that loving you would end badly, that feelings bring chaos, that vulnerability is weakness. They reminded your soulmate of past wounds, reopening emotional scars just enough to make them believe the future would mirror the past. They made your soulmate question their instincts, their worth, their readiness. They fed the fear that has curled around their heart like cold fingers. And most of all, my child, this enemy crafted scenarios to keep them away from you. They created misunderstandings. They intercepted messages, sometimes literally, sometimes through influence. They misrepresented your intentions. They hinted that your heart was elsewhere, that you were unreachable, that you were uninterested. They built a wall of illusions, hoping your soulmate would retreat into silence and stay contained where they could remain easily controlled. But what this enemy underestimated was the divine thread woven between your spirit and your soulmates. No manipulation can sever what heaven has aligned. So instead of killing the connection, their interference caused pressure to build. Every lie pulled the truth tighter. Every act of jealousy made your soulmate feel the absence of you more sharply. Every attempt to separate you pushed their emotions closer to the surface until the weight became unbearable. Your soulmate reached a point where their inner world was a battlefield. On one side, the love they felt for you strong, undeniable, burning quietly through every thought. On the other, the fear this enemy had cultivated, the confusion seeded into their vulnerability. They tried to function normally, but the internal tug-of-war wore them down. Their heart was pulling toward you. Their mind was clouded by influence they didn't fully recognize. And as the tension grew, their emotions became unstable, not because they were weak, but because they were fighting a war meant for spiritual realms, not human strength. This enemy pushed them to the edge where pretending was no longer possible. The confession you witnessed, the trembling words, the raw truth pouring out in front of the officers was not a moment of recklessness. It was a moment all the manipulation snapped. A divine backlash against the lies spoken over them. A spiritual collision between what was false and what was destined. Their soul simply chose truth, even if their mind was unprepared. And understand this, my child. I allowed witnesses to stand present so the enemy's interference could no longer operate in the shadows. Heaven brings truth into the open when darkness has lingered too long behind closed doors. The unraveling of their emotions was not a fall. It was an emancipation. And now, I must take you deeper. For there is a divine investigation unfolding in the unseen, a heavenly review of every lie, every intention, every hidden act meant to fracture what I have joined. My child, come with me into the unseen realm where human eyes cannot wander, where truth is not guessed or debated but illuminated with perfect clarity. For while the world saw trembling, confession, and chaos, heaven saw evidence. Every whispered lie, every manipulative intention, every hidden act that pushed your soulmate toward collapse has been brought into my light. Nothing remains concealed here. Nothing escapes my attention when it concerns the destiny I have written for you. In the quiet behind the moment, I gathered what has been hidden. I examined the threads that wove themselves through your soulmate's fear, the subtle influences, the emotional traps, the deliberate attempts to confuse the heart I chose for you. And as I sifted through the shadows, a pattern emerged. A pattern of interference. A pattern of jealousy. A pattern of quiet sabotage aimed at bending their spirit away from yours. Every time this enemy planted doubt, I recorded it. Every moment they spoke against your connection, I saw it. Every attempt they made to keep your soulmate emotionally off balance, I witnessed. When they smiled while harboring unspoken envy, I documented the interior truth beneath their performance. My child, there is a divine courtroom in the unseen realms, and the case concerning your connection has now entered its proceedings. Do not imagine a chamber of harsh judgment. Imagine a place where clarity reigns, where motives stand naked, where actions align with consequences. where lies evaporate under the weight of divine truth. Your soulmate has been tormented not by confusion of their own making, but by an emotional fog crafted by someone who feared the greatness of the love rising between you. And now, that fog is being dismantled piece by piece. Your soulmate's heart stands before me not as a defendant, but as one who hath been overwhelmed by forces they never fully understood. I do not condemn them for breaking, trembling, confessing in a place of pressure. I see why it happened. I see what led to it. I see the invisible burdens they carried while trying to appear composed. Their collapse was not instability, it was evidence. Evidence that the truth inside them was fighting to be freed from the constraints placed upon it. I have traced every thread leading to that moment. I have examined the spiritual fingerprints on their fears. I have weighed the intentions of those involved in it, and the scales do not lie. The enemy who interfered will face consequences not from human hands, but from the divine alignment now shifting into place. What was done in secret will be revealed. What was spoken against your connection will dissolve, and the influence that once distorted their perception will lose its grip. My investigation, my child, goes deeper still. I have looked not only at the acts of the enemy but at the prayers you whispered when you felt confused, the longing that rose from your spirit when you sensed distance, the tears you shed when you felt something was wrong. Your prayers were evidence too. Your pain was noted. Your intuition was recorded. You did not imagine the interference, you felt it spiritually before any signs appeared in the natural. And now the veil is being lifted. Your soulmate, standing before those officers with trembling hands and a collapsing heart, was unknowingly positioned in a moment where truth and revelation collided. Their confession, public, raw, unfiltered, became the catalyst that triggered this divine investigation. It forced everything hidden to surface. It exposed cracks in the lies surrounding them. It activated a higher authority than any earthly figure present in that moment. The officers saw emotion. The people nearby saw surprise. But heaven saw the opening of a sealed case. You must know this, my child. When I investigate, I also correct. When I reveal, I also restore. When I expose darkness, I also strengthen the light that follows. A shift is already forming, subtle but unstoppable, flowing toward the next stage of your story. And soon, the spiritual atmosphere around your soulmate will change. Their clarity will sharpen. Their fear will weaken. Their heart will begin to awaken from the confusion that once clouded it. My child, step softly now, for the air around your destiny has begun to move in a way your spirit has already sensed but could not fully interpret. Something changed the moment your soulmate's truth broke open. The atmosphere, once heavy with confusion and emotional interference, began to clear slowly at first, like dawn pushing back the horizon, and then with increasing force as the spiritual realm responded to the confession released into the world. Heaven does not remain silent when truth rises. Angels do not stand still when a heart breaks open in honesty. And destiny does not remain dormant once the veil begins to tear. Everything that had been stagnant around your soul, like fear, doubt, manipulation, spiritual fog, felt the tremor of their confession and began to loosen its grip. The unseen realm shifted, and the balance that once leaned against your connection started turning in your favor. Your soulmate may not have understood it, but the moment their knees weakened, the chains around their heart cracked. The lies that once held them back began to lose power. The enemy's influence, so subtle yet so invasive, started to unravel. Their spirit felt the first breath of freedom, though their body still trembled under the emotional aftermath. The officers watching did not know it, but they were witnessing a spiritual birth, messy, raw, ungraceful, yet sacred. I was there, my child, moving like soft thunder. I calmed the storm rising in your soulmate's chest, soothing their spiraling thoughts even as their emotions remained unsteady. My presence wrapped around them, invisible yet undeniable, lifting the weight that had once pressed them into silence. For the first time in a long time, they felt something shifting inside them, a clarity trying to break through, a warmth awakening beneath their fear, a sense that the truth they had confessed might actually bring peace instead of destruction. One of the officers stepped forward, intending to guide them to a calmer space. But in the unseen, an angel stepped forward as well, placing a gentle barrier between your soulmate and any further misunderstanding. I shielded them, not from the officers themselves, but from the emotional misinterpretations that could have escalated the moment. Even in their trembling state, I ensured they remained safe, protected, and understood. The spiritual shift extended beyond that scene. It rippled outward into your soulmate's memories, loosening the grip of past hurts. It moved into their thoughts, stirring questions that had long been buried. It pressed gently against the fears that once controlled them, softening their edges. And in the quiet of their heart, something undeniable began to form a pull toward you, stronger and clearer than before, now unfiltered by interference. My child, you must know this: your prayers, your longing, your moments of deep spiritual sensitivity played a role in this shift. You have been calling for clarity, for truth, for alignment, often without realizing your voice was moving through realms your eyes could not see. Every whisper you released rose like incense, and now the answers are unfolding before you. The atmosphere around your soulmate is changing so profoundly that even they will begin to see signs. People who once influenced them will lose access. Conversations that once confused them will fall flat. Thoughts that once frightened them will begin to dissolve. A new understanding will dawn within them, soft but steady, like light filtering through cracked stone. The shift is not the conclusion, it is the turning point. It is the moment where destiny begins to correct itself, where truth starts rising from the ashes of fear, where the path between you and your soulmate becomes clearer than it has ever been. And now, my child, the next stage begins, truth rising, justice forming, and lies losing their power. My child, breathe with me now, for the moment we step into is one where truth begins to climb from the depths like a long-buried seed breaking open toward the light. The spiritual shift that swept through the atmosphere did not end with calmness. It awakened a rising, a movement of revelation that could no longer be restrained. What was concealed began to surface. What was distorted began to correct itself. What was twisted into fear began to straighten into clarity. Your soulmate, still trembling from their confession, began to feel something unfamiliar within their chest, a steadiness attempting to form, a quiet realization that the collapse they endured was not destruction but release. Their breathing deepened, their thoughts slowed, and the fog that once clouded their perception began to thin. They did not yet understand the full extent of the divine investigation unfolding around them, but they felt something lifting, shifting, realigning inside their spirit. And then, my child, the truth began to rise. The person who interfered, the one whose jealousy shaped so much of your soulmate's confusion, started to lose their influence. Conversations that once swayed your soulmate now sounded empty. Advice that once felt comforting now tasted of manipulation. Their voice lost its grip, its charm, its deceptive sweetness. Your soulmate began to feel the weight of their intentions, the subtle wrongness that had lingered in moments they previously overlooked. They didn't need confrontation. They didn't need proof. Their spirit began recognizing what their mind had been too afraid to admit. At the same time, clarity about you began to bloom. Thoughts of you no longer stirred panic, they stirred truth. The confession that escaped them unplanned, unguarded, began to echo through their body with new meaning. Each repetition of your name, whispered through trembling lips, returned to them like a revelation. This love was real, undeniable, and divinely orchestrated. They began understanding that the weight of their emotions was not a burden, it was evidence of the depth of your connection. Justice, my child, was quietly forming in the unseen. I began to reposition people in your soulmate's life. Those who encouraged fear found themselves distanced. Those who carried pure intentions drifted closer. Conversations shifted. Circumstances rearranged. Even their own thoughts aligned with greater accuracy. I removed the illusions bit by bit, ensuring that what remained was truth, not confusion, not manipulation, not fear. One officer, the one who sensed deeper emotion rather than chaos, spoke softly to them. His words held no threat, no judgment. He simply asked if they had someone they trusted, someone they cared for deeply. And your soulmate, without hesitation, spoke your name again. Not in panic this time, but in recognition. Their voice steadier, their heart more open, their truth taking shape. What you must understand, my child, is that earthly authority witnessed what was really happening, a person overwhelmed not by instability, but by love fighting past fear. And heaven witnessed even more, a heart breaking free from the grip of a jealous soul who tried too hard to rewrite destiny. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers through clarity. Sometimes it moves through shifting relationships. Sometimes it appears when lies lose their power. And right now, justice is forming as truth surfaces, as influence dissolves, as intentions reveal themselves without anyone needing to speak them aloud. Your soulmate is awakening to what has always been theirs to feel, and the enemy who distorted their path is being moved out of alignment. But my child, the greatest shift is still coming. Your heart is about to cross a threshold from rising truth into full, undeniable awakening. My child, enter gently now, for this moment is tender, fragile, and holy. Your soulmate, once trembling beneath waves of emotion they could not contain, now stands at the edge of a dawning clarity. Their breathing has steadied. Their heart, though still aching, beats with a new rhythm, one that recognizes truth instead of resisting it. The confusion that once clouded their vision has thinned like mist dissolving under morning light, and for the first time in a long while, they begin to see what has been standing before them with divine certainty. The officers no longer feel like looming authority. They feel like distant echoes compared to the storm of revelation unfolding inside your soulmate. Their mind replays the confession they spoke aloud, the trembling words, the raw honesty, and instead of shame, they feel an overwhelming sense of relief. Something in them whispers, "You finally said it. You finally told the truth." And as those words echo within them, they realize how long their heart has been waiting for that release. But with that realization comes fear, not the paralyzing fear that once dominated them, but a fear born of awakening, a fear of losing you, a fear that their confession might have reached you too late, a fear that while they were wrestling with their emotions, you may have pulled away, grown silent, or believed they didn't care. This fear is not destructive, it is clarifying. It shows them the depth of their love, the truth of their longing, the urgency that now pulses in their spirit. They understand now, with painful clarity, that every moment of distance between you was a wound they carried. Every silence from you echoed louder than any words. Every thought of you stirred something they tried desperately to control. And now, after speaking your name publicly and allowing truth to break through the walls they built, their heart awakens fully to the reality they can no longer deny. They love you deeply, fiercely, and irrevocably. Images of you flash through their mind, not dramatic memories, but small, sacred moments. The sound of your voice, the softness in your presence, the way your spirit felt like home even before they admitted it. Each memory strengthens the awakening rising in them, pulling them into an undeniable truth. Your life feels incomplete without you. Their heart feels unanchored unless it rests in the knowing that you exist, that you are real, that you are connected to them in a way destiny itself cannot undo. This realization breaks them open in a new way, not into collapse, but into clarity. Their hands no longer tremble from fear, they tremble from urgency. They feel compelled to find you, to speak to you, to explain everything that clouded their mind. They want to tell you about the jealousy that distorted their perception, the manipulation they couldn't identify, the fears that whispered lies into their heart. I want you to know it wasn't a lot of love, it was too much love mixed with too much gain. In this awakening, my child, your soulmate realizes that their heart has always known the truth, even when their mind resisted it. And now that truth stands fully illuminated before them. They feel drawn toward you with a spiritual pull so powerful that even the officers sense a shift in their energy. A calmness settles over them, replacing panic with purpose. Your soulmate's awakening marks the moment destiny begins to move swiftly. The universe, once stalled by fear and interference, now aligns itself behind a heart determined to seek reconciliation, truth, and divine connection. My child, step into this moment with reverence, for the bond between you and your soulmate is no ordinary thread. It is ancient, woven in places untouched by time, strengthened by prayers you whispered in the dark, shaped by longing you carried even when you doubted its purpose. And now, as your soulmate awakens to their truth, your connection begins to move with a power that bends the course of events around you. What once worked against you begins to reverse. What once delayed alignment begins to lose its hold. Destiny, long tangled by fear and interference, starts to correct itself in real time. Your soulmate stands in a fragile calm, their heart still trembling, but not from instability. This trembling comes from the gravitational pull toward you, a pull that grows stronger with every breath. They feel you in the quiet between their thoughts. They sense your presence even from afar, the way your spirit has always reached toward theirs without force, without pressure, simply by existing in truth. This connection becomes their compass, their anchor, their direction. As their mind clears, they begin to understand something profound. Every prayer you whispered for them carried weight. Your tears were not unnoticed. Your longing was not empty. Every moment you felt their distance, every time you sensed something was wrong, every instinct that told you interference was at play, heaven heard you. And now your energy, your faith, your inner strength begins to influence the shift unfolding around them. Your soulmate feels this. They do not understand it intellectually, but spiritually. They feel drawn toward healing, drawn toward honesty, drawn toward a future that has your name etched into its center. The more they acknowledge this pull, the more the old fears fall away like brittle leaves. The more they think of you, the more their heart steadies. Their awakening becomes their motivation, and your connection becomes their direction. My child, this is where destiny begins to reverse. The enemy who once whispered confusion into their heart finds their influence dissolving. Words that once held power now fall flat. Manipulative encouragements now sound hollow. Their spiritual access to your soulmate weakens as the connection between you grows stronger. In the unseen realm, angels shift positions, forming a protective barrier around the bond that was once fragile but is now strengthening with divine intention. Your soulmate begins a silent vow within themselves, a vow to come toward you, to repair what was broken, to confess fully in a moment free from panic and pressure. They want to explain everything. They want to tell you how deeply they felt for you, but how fear tangled their mind. They want you to know that their collapse was not shame, it was truth bursting through suppression. They want to reach you before the fear of losing you becomes reality. And as this vow forms within them, I move through the fabric of your shared destiny. I lift blockages that once stood as high as mountains. I remove emotional debris left behind by jealousy and manipulation. I clear pathways that were once tangled with misunderstanding. And in the spiritual realm, I reorder what was disordered. Your hearts, once pushed apart by forces that did not belong in the story, now begin to align like stars drawn into formation by a higher command. This alignment marks the reversal, the moment where everything begins to flow toward restoration. But the story is not finished yet, my child. There is one final movement, one last unfolding where blessing enters, where fear leaves, where destiny seals itself with clarity and divine peace. My child, come into this final moment with a soft heart, for what I place before you now is not the end of a story, but the beginning of a restored path. The tension has broken. The fear has loosened. The fog has lifted. And what remains is clarity woven with divine intention, a future realigning itself piece by piece until it matches the blueprint I have written for your destiny. Your soulmate, now standing in the quiet aftermath of their awakening, feels a calm they have not known in years. The officers around them no longer feel like authority. They feel like witnesses placed exactly where they needed to be so that heaven could mark the moment truth returned to their spirit. No chaos remains within them now. Only truth. Only longing. Only the steady pulse of a love they can no longer deny. As they take a slow breath, something within them shifts completely. They understand that their confession was not a mistake. It was a release, a turning point, a divine act that freed their heart from the chains of silence. They know now that loving you is not a risk to fear, it is a truth to honor. And as their spirit settles into that realization, their path begins to glow with clarity. Your presence in their life, your prayers, your patience, your quiet strength has shaped their transformation more than you know. You were never powerless. You were never waiting in vain. Your love carried them through battles they didn't know how to name. And now, as destiny rises to meet you both, I pour blessing into the cracks where fear once lived. The enemy who tried to interfere has lost access. Their influence has faded into irrelevance. Their intentions have been exposed in the spiritual realm and rendered powerless. What once caused separation now collapses under the weight of truth. No weapon formed against this connection can stand in the presence of what has been divinely aligned. Your soulmate's heart now moves toward you with purpose. They feel compelled to reach out, to create a moment where they can look you in the eyes and speak the truth with clarity instead of trembling. They want to tell you everything. They want to rebuild what fear fractured. They want you to know that their collapse was not weakness, it was transformation. And they are ready now, more than ever, to walk into the future that has always been waiting for both of you. My child, hear me. You are not losing them. You have never lost them. Their spirit has always been tied to yours, even when their mind strayed into fear. What is meant for you cannot be stolen. What I have written cannot be erased. And now the blessing settles between you like light, soft yet undeniable, preparing the way for reconciliation, communication, and renewed connection. Let peace enter your heart now. Let reassurance settle into your bones. For I am sealing this chapter not with uncertainty, but with promise. The path ahead will unfold with more clarity than you have ever known. The storm is over. The awakening is complete. And the blessing is already in motion. If this word has touched your spirit and you feel its truth, my child, let your voice resonate softly by writing in the comments, I receive the blessing meant for me. And as you do, allow peace to settle deeply within you, knowing that destiny has begun to move in your favor. Your story continues from here, restored, protected, and aligned.